You can buy a bottle of Japanese whiskey for $30. You can also buy one for $1.5 million. The standard explanation, it's popular, is not wrong. It's just almost useless. The real answer involves a decades-long production collapse, a wood that takes 2 centuries to grow, auction psychology that warps perception, and a fourth cause most analysts won't mention, one that changes what the other 3 actually mean. Chapter 1. The Production Gap. In the early 1980s, the Japanese whiskey industry operated at an extraordinary scale. Domestic consumption reached its historical peak in 1983, when National Tax Agency records showed 380 million liters of whiskey cleared for the market. At the center of this boom was a single blended expression: Suntory Old. In 1980, Suntory Old sold 12.4 million cases, representing an 86% market share of its price segment. This meant that roughly 1 out of every 3 bottles of whiskey sold in Japan that year was a bottle of Suntory Old. It was a cultural phenomenon built on a massive appetite for domestic spirits. But this high watermark preceded a steep domestic collapse. The burst of the Japanese asset price bubble in the early 1990s gutted corporate entertainment budgets and consumer spending. Simultaneously, tax reforms in 1989 removed the traditional grading system, raising the tax burden on standard whiskeys and making them less competitive. Consumers migrated away from dark spirits toward shochu, a cheaper, lighter alternative favored by the revised tax structure. By 2001, domestic whiskey consumption dropped to 110 million liters. By 2008, it reached a historic trough of 75 million liters, roughly 1/5 of the 1983 peak. Facing a rapidly shrinking market, the industry's institutional anchors, Suntory and Nikka, made the only logical business decision: they cut production. Distilleries like Yoichi and Miyagi-Kyo operated for only a few weeks a year, and the volume of new make spirit laid down in oak barrels dwindled to a fraction of past levels. Legacy producers mothballed facilities or shut down permanently. The historic Hanyu distillery, founded in 1941, ceased production entirely in 2000, halting the continuity of its single malt supply forever. Although Ichiro Akuto would establish the celebrated Chichibu distillery in 2008, this new wave of craft production arrived long after the gap in aged stocks had formed. This decades-long contraction is the silent structural driver of today's extreme pricing. When global demand suddenly exploded in the 2010s, collectors and enthusiasts sought out aged expressions, bottles carrying age statements of 12, 18, or 25 years. But distilleries could not simply increase supply by running their stills longer today. The mature barrels required to fill those bottles did not exist. They were missing because during the long years of economic stagnation, those casks were never filled in the first place. Chapter 2. The Wood Problem. Mizunara oak casks represent less than 1% of Japan's total barrel inventory. Alongside the shortage of aged spirit lies a material bottleneck dictated entirely by biology. This is the story of Mizunara oak, the native Japanese wood that matures the country's most expensive expressions. Unlike American white oak or European species, a Mizunara tree must grow for more than 200 years to reach a 60-centimeter diameter, which is the minimum thickness required to cut watertight staves. Even at the House of Suntory, these casks account for less than 1% of its 1.6 million active barrels. The wood itself is knotty, porous, and highly prone to warping, making cooperage a rare, specialized craft. Because of this high failure rate and the lengthy growth cycle of the trees, coopers produce only around 200 Mizunara casks across the entire Japanese whiskey industry each year. A single new barrel costs between $5,000 and $6,000, roughly 20 times the price of a standard American oak cask. While distilleries can easily scale up their purchases of imported sherry or bourbon containers, they cannot bypass the physical limits of Quercus crispula. This structural constraint is governed entirely by forestry and time, leaving market capital and consumer demand powerless. No amount of money can compress 2 centuries of natural growth. Chapter 3. The Auction Effect. In November 2020, Bonhams Hong Kong sold a complete 54-bottle set of Hanyu Ichiro's Malt card series for $1,520,000. This single transaction illustrated a massive, exponential escalation in collector demand. In 2015, the same complete set sold for $490,000, before climbing to $917,000 in 2019. Single bottles reached the exact same stratosphere. In March 2020, Sotheby's auctioned a Karuizawa 52-year-old for roughly $435,000, an extreme price driven by the fact that only 41 bottles were ever produced from this defunct distillery. This inflationary pattern quickly swept up active legacy brands as well. In 2018, Bonhams recorded the sale of an ultra-rare Yamazaki 50-year-old for $343,318. International auction houses like Bonhams and Sotheby's project these results to a global audience. For defunct producers like Hanyu and Karuizawa, which represent permanently finite sources of liquid, every bottle opened, collected, or poured further shrinks the global supply, naturally driving subsequent bidding higher. However, the intense media coverage surrounding these record-breaking sales creates a powerful psychological feedback loop. These spectacular, highly isolated outliers become the primary benchmark that everyday consumers use to evaluate the entire category. This auction signal distorts broader market perception, convincing buyers that all Japanese whiskey carries an inherent, ultra-premium value, driving up retail prices even for younger bottles that are neither old nor genuinely rare. Chapter 4. The Correction. The belief that the market moves in one uninterrupted rise is a myth. As early as 2016, analysts at Rare Whiskey 101 warned that the meteoric trajectory of defunct distilleries like Karuizawa was unsustainable. In the years since, the market has split. While the ultra-rare top tier continues to appreciate, the broader secondary market has cooled, losing value in real terms. Rare Whiskey 101's indices show that after 2018, the 50 most expensive bottles lost 26% of their combined value, while the next 50 gained just 5%. This correction does not erase real scarcity, but it changes how we must read price signals. Spectacular auction headlines are isolated outliers, not reliable indicators of actual retail value. The market is also stabilizing through new regulations. The Japan Spirits and Liqueurs Makers Association's labeling standards, fully enforced on April 1, 2024, now protect consumer confidence by ensuring that authentic Japanese whiskey is entirely distilled, aged, and bottled in Japan. Genuine scarcity remains, but the era of runaway speculative hype is giving way to a normalized market focused on long-term fundamentals. This is Uncorking Japan. What are your thoughts on where these prices are heading, and what should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more evidence-based investigations. As market hype cools, we are left with a permanent structural reality. True liquid history cannot be rushed. What questions or video suggestions do you have for the channel? Let me know in the comments. This is Uncorking Japan. Subscribe for more.